The millionaire single father's brilliant young son is allergic to every woman who tries to marry his dad except for the girl who sells snacks on the street. Would you rather have chocolate or strawberry, Erky? The woman's voice was overly sweet, as if she were talking to a toddler instead of a 10-year-old. Her blonde hair was stiff with hairspray, and her smile seemed practiced, stuck on her lips like it had been perfected in front of a mirror. Eric frowned and stepped back. "My name is Eric. Not Ericy. Just Eric." She laughed, showing off her perfect teeth, and glanced at her sparkling designer watch. "So polite, just like your father." Eric didn't smile or react. He looked her straight in the eyes. "You don't like kids. You're pretending." For a split second, her expression slipped, just enough for Eric to notice. "What do you mean?" she asked sweetly. "I just want to get to know you." "No," Eric replied, his voice steady. "You're trying to win me over so you can marry my dad, but once you do, you'll send me away to a boarding school in another country." She blinked, her smile fading. "You're just a child. Don't think you're that clever." "I am a child," Eric said calmly, "but my dad listens to me." And he did, always had, at just 10 years old, with an IQ of 160. Eric Carter was the unofficial guardian of his father's heart. David Carter was a self-made billionaire, one of the country's most powerful CEOs, respected and admired. But behind the headlines and boardroom bravado, he was a man who quietly raised a son alone since Eric was 2. Eric had seen them all the women who drifted into their lives, glamorous and charming, but always hiding something. He dismissed each one with quiet precision. Most believed they could fake affection or kindness. Most thought children were easy to deceive. They were wrong. That afternoon, as a summer storm arrived earlier than expected, Eric found himself outside school alone. The driver was stuck in traffic. Instead of waiting inside, Eric wandered to a nearby park, where puddles grew and trees bent in the wind. That's when he saw it. His limited edition toy car, lost days before, was floating near a sewer drain in the street. He dashed toward it without thinking. He didn't see the scooter coming, or hear the screech of tires and the driver's alarm shout. Before the vehicle could reach him, a pair of arms yanked him back. Eric landed hard on the wet ground, water soaking his sleeves. He looked up, shocked. "Are you crazy, kid?" A woman's voice demanded, breathless and sharp. She crouched beside him, one hand still gripping his wrist. Her raincoat was soaked, and her hair was tucked under a damp baseball cap. In her other hand was a basket of hot, freshly fried fish cakes, still steaming despite the rain. You saved me," Eric said, catching his breath. "Yeah, and I ruined half my day's earnings to do it," she muttered, carefully setting the basket down. "But I'd rather lose snacks than see you get hurt." Eric stared at her. "You don't want anything?" She looked puzzled. "What?" "You don't want money or a selfie with my dad. You're not going to tell everyone what you did." She laughed a real, unfiltered, genuine laugh. "You think people only help when they want something?" "Usually." "Well, not me. Some of us help because someone needs help. That's all." Eric studied her, searching for any sign she was lying, but found none. Her voice was honest. Her face was annoyed but kind, and she'd saved him without knowing who he was. "What's your name?" "Isla," she replied. "I sell snacks at the corner cart." "And you?" "Eric Carter." She raised an eyebrow. "Carter?" "As in Carter Enterprises." Eric nodded. "That's my dad." She wiped her hands on a towel. "Impressive. Still doesn't change the fact you almost got run over." An hour later, David Carter's sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Eric climbed in, still damp, unusually quiet enough for his father to glance back several times. As they pulled into their driveway, Eric finally spoke. "Dad, I found her." David looked at him in the rear-view mirror. "Found who?" Eric met his eyes, completely serious. "The perfect wife for you." David nearly slammed on the brakes. "Excuse me?" "Her name is Isla. She sells fish cakes. She saved me, and she didn't ask for anything. She didn't lie. She sells fish cakes. She rescued me and didn't expect anything in return. She was honest. She didn't pretend. And Dad, he gave a small, Astonished smile. I wasn't allergic to her. David laughed, surprised by the warmth growing in his chest. So you approve? Eric nodded. You should try her fish cakes, but don't eat too many. She has other customers to serve. David smiled at his son's unwavering certainty. After all the failed dates, the masks and the letdowns, for the first time, curiosity sparked within him. Who was this girl who earned Eric's trust with nothing but sincerity? And why? Just hearing her name stirred something in David's heart. He had met presidents and prime ministers, shaken hands with billionaires, been named one of the most influential business leaders of the decade, and built an empire from scratch. Yet none of that prepared him for the nerves he felt as he approached a small street cart that smelled like fried heaven. There she was, Isla, the woman his son had called the perfect wife less than a day ago. She was cleaning a tray, her hands moving with practiced ease, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her cart was simple but spotless. A handwritten chalkboard listed her snacks: fish cakes, dumplings, and something called Golden Crunch Bites. He cleared his throat. She looked up, her face friendly but not surprised. Afternoon. Sweet or spicy? Which do you like best? He asked. She tilted her head, really looking at him for the first time. You're not from around here. I suppose I stand out. You're wearing a suit worth more than my cart, she said with a grin. But that's fine. Everyone eats. He smiled. Then I'll have whatever you recommend. She handed him a paper tray. Fish cakes, just out of the fryer. Careful they bite back. He took a bite and blinked. Crispy outside, soft and flavorful inside. This is amazing. Told you, she said with a smirk. Just then, a small voice chimed in behind David. I told you too. Isla looked past him, her smile widening. Eric, back already? Eric grinned, bouncing up beside his dad. She remembered me. I never forget someone who almost got flattened on my watch. David watched closely. Eric was beaming, his eyes shining, and the usual caution he showed around adults, especially women, was gone. Isla handed Eric a tiny snack box without being asked. On the house, but only if you promise not to scare me like that again. I promise, Eric said between bites. David leaned against the cart, still observing. You've clearly made quite the impression. I save lives and feed people, Isla said, pretending to flick her collar. Superpowers, basically. David laughed. You really don't know who I am, do you? She paused, glanced at him, then shrugged. Nope. Should I? He looked at her for a moment, then smiled. Not at all. That evening, as the sun set in golden light bathed the city, David made a spontaneous decision, even he was surprised. Would you join us for dinner sometime? He asked, his tone even. Isla blinked. Dinner? I'd love for you to come by. Just a casual meal at our place. She looked at Eric, then back at David. I appreciate the invitation, but I don't really think I'm the type who gets invited to places like yours. David straightened a little. And what kind of person is that? Isla gave him a gentle smile. The kind who doesn't belong in a mansion. I fry fish. I don't sip wine. David started to reply, but Eric interrupted. She's not like the others, Dad. Isla looked at him, surprised. Eric stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. She doesn't need you. That's why I trust her. She's not trying to get anything. She just is. And I need her. Silence hung in the air. Isla stared at Eric, visibly moved. David felt something shift inside, as if a door long closed had finally opened. Eric turned to Isla. Please don't say no. Not for you. For me. Isla hesitated, biting her lip. You too are something else. We get that a lot, David said softly. I'm not used to this kind of attention, she admitted. Especially not from men in suits and kids who sound like philosophers. Eric laughed. That's fair, she sighed at last. Okay, just dinner. But I'm bringing dessert. David smiled. Deal. As she packed up for the night. David found himself watching her not with the distant curiosity he usually reserved for people outside his world, but with something softer, something he couldn't yet name. That evening, as Eric drifted off to sleep with a satisfied smile, David sat by the window, his thoughts lingering on Isla's eyes, her fierce spirit, and her refusal to play along with the usual games. She didn't know who he was, and somehow that made him want to know him even more. Eric had never been good at lying, but when it came to sneaking away from his bodyguards to visit Isla's snack cart, he had become an expert strategist. He had memorized their patrol patterns, discovered shortcuts through the school's garden hedges, and learned how to blend into groups of children just long enough to disappear. Every time, he ended up at the same spot at a corner near the park where the aroma of fish cakes and sweet batter drifted through the air like music, and Isla stood like a beacon amid the city's noisy, bustling crowd. She never scolded him for avoiding security. Instead, she taught him how to flip batter without burning it, how to season by taste alone, and how to fold dumplings with his eyes closed. Sometimes, she shared stories about her customers' funny, sad, wild tales from the real world beyond chauffeured rides and ivory towers. Eric absorbed every word. "I like it here," he once said, sitting on an overturned milk crate and munching a shrimp roll. Isla glanced down at him. "Why?" "It smells like fried oil and sweat." "Exactly." Eric grinned. "It smells like real life." David noticed a change almost immediately. Eric laughed more often. He argued less. He stopped wondering if people liked him just because of his dad. When David asked why, Eric simply said, "Because someone sees me for who I really am." That someone, David realized, was Isla. Their encounters became more frequent, sometimes by chance, sometimes because David ordered snacks under the pretense of trying something new, and sometimes just because he wanted to see her. Each time, she greeted him the same way, no flattery, no flirting, just curiosity in her eyes and that familiar wry smile. "So, do CEOs really eat street snacks?" she teased once. David chuckled. "Only the brave ones." And somehow, between bites and conversations, something began to change. One Friday afternoon, David left work early and drove past the park. He hadn't expected to see what he found. Eric was curled up on a bench next to Isla's cart, asleep with his head resting on a small pile of napkins. Beside him lay a thick packet labeled Math Olympiad Practice Set 4, filled with Isla's handwriting, corrections, notes, and encouragement in the margins. David quietly stepped out of the car and approached. Isla noticed him first and raised a finger to her lips. "He had a long morning," she whispered, "and apparently skipped lunch." David looked down at his son. Eric's face was peaceful, calm, softer than David had seen it in weeks. He insisted on finishing 3 full practice sets before eating. Isla added, said he wanted to earn his shrimp balls. David chuckled softly. Then his eyes returned to the packet. "You're tutoring him?" he asked. Isla shrugged, wiping her hands on her apron. "He's brilliant, but he overthinks. I just help him find the joy in it." David studied her for a moment. "Do you realize what you're really teaching him?" She tilted her head, uncertain. "You're teaching him how to be happy." Isla's breath caught, and for once, words didn't come easily. "He's just a kid I care about, that's all." David smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's all it takes." They stood silently, watching Eric sleep. Eventually, Isla spoke again, her voice softer. "I never meant to become part of his world. I was just trying to be kind." "You didn't try," David said gently. "You just were." The moment hung between them. Not romance, not yet, but something tender and quiet, like the first note of a song waiting to be played. And in that silence, beneath the fading sun and the scent of warm dumplings, something else began to grow, a slow, deep connection neither of them expected. The ballroom gleamed with crystal chandeliers and the clink of champagne glasses. Waiters in tuxedos moved gracefully among clusters of women in designer gowns and men in tailored suits, while a string quartet played an elegant tune in the corner. It was the kind of place Isla had only ever seen in movies. She stood at the edge of the room, dressed in a simple navy dress Eric had chosen for her, fingers wrapped tightly around a glass of sparkling water she barely touched. Beside her, David Carter, the evening's host, was deep in conversation with 2 foreign investors. He had introduced her, simply and kindly. "This is Isla," he said, "a friend." A few heads turned, some curious, some judgmental, and soon whispers began. "That's her, the snack cart girl. I heard she sells fried squid." I heard she saved the boy. Maybe she just planned it all. Some girls know how to play the long game. Isla heard every word. She didn't react. She simply stood there, offering a polite smile, her eyes scanning the crowd for a familiar face. Eric was supposed to arrive late. She hoped he wouldn't show up. Not here. Not tonight. A group of elegantly dressed women approached her, their poise flawless. One, with red lipstick and diamond earrings, gave a steely smile and tilted her head. "So you're Isla, David's friend?" "Yes," Isla replied simply. "You must be fascinating. It's not every day someone jumps from a food cart to a formal gala." Another woman laughed softly. "Oh, come on. We all know how this ends. Girl saves boy. Girl meets dad. Girl moves into the mansion. It's a modern fairy tale." A third woman added, her voice sugary but cold. "We just hope it's love, not a strategy." Isla stayed silent. Her grip tightened on her glass, but her expression remained calm. She refused to lose her composure. Not here, not tonight, not where it could embarrass David. Instead, she dipped her head slightly. "Thank you for your concern." Just as one woman prepared a final cutting remark, a new voice cut through the room. Clear, sharp, and young. "Stop talking about it like that." Heads turned. The room fell silent. Eric stood in the center, cheeks flushed, small fists clenched. "You don't know anything about her," he shouted, his voice shaking but strong. "She's the one who saved me. She's the one who didn't care who I was or what my dad owned. She never wanted anything." The guests froze. Drinks paused midair. Even the musicians stopped playing. Eric took a breath, his voice growing steadier. "If I have to choose between all of you and her, I choose her. Every single time." The silence was complete. David moved without thinking, crossing the floor in a few long strides, taking Isla's hand in his, and facing the stunned crowd. "Eric's right," David said, his voice low but unwavering. "This woman is someone I'm proud to know. She's brought more light into our lives than any business deal or fancy party ever could." Isla looked at him, astonished. He gave her hand a small, reassuring squeeze. The women who had mocked her looked away. The whispers faded. And for the first time that night, Isla didn't feel like an outsider. She felt seen, chosen. As the music cautiously resumed and conversations picked up again, Isla turned to David. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he replied. "And I wanted to." Across the room, Eric watched him, his father, and the girl who had never treated him like a pawn. He smiled. He had spoken up. He had chosen. And for the first time, the world had listened. The next morning, Isla's photo was everywhere. Not the one of her serving fish cakes in the rain. Not the one with flour on her cheek, laughing with Eric. No, this one was different. It showed her standing beside David at the gala, hand in his, with headlines screaming from every digital screen. From fish cakes to fortune. Street seller hooks a CEO. Snack girl's overnight climb. Is it love or strategy? Cinderella or con artist? Isla stared at the screen in her tiny apartment, her tea untouched and cold. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers. Reporters. Trolls. Each message stung more than the last. She had never wanted this, never chased fame, never pretended. All she had ever done was save a boy and feed him dumplings. By afternoon, she made her decision. She closed her cart early, turned off her phone, and sat down to write a letter. 3 days later, David knocked on Isla's door. His collar was undone, his eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. When no one answered, he knocked again, harder. Still nothing. He looked down and saw a small brown package on the step. His name was written in gentle handwriting. He picked it up and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a box of Eric's favorite shrimp dumplings, cold but carefully packed, and a folded note. "David, I'm sorry. I didn't ask for this world, and I can't survive in it. Please tell Eric he did nothing wrong. He deserves better than a mother who gets mocked in the papers. I care about him. I care about you. But I don't belong where everything I am gets twisted into something ugly." David sat on the step for a long time, staring at her words. He had been naive to think he could protect her just by holding her hand in a room full of critics. He thought his name could shield her, but it only made her a target. Eric stopped asking where she was on the fourth day. He stopped eating her favorite snacks, stopped smiling. David tried everything: bribes, games, even a trip to the science museum. But nothing worked. Did she leave because of me? Eric finally whispered one night, curled up in bed. David shook his head. She left because people were cruel. But not you, Eric. Never you. Eric pulled the blanket tighter around himself. Then why didn't you stop them? David had no answer. He sat in silence, watching the boy who once burned so bright now slowly dimming. And in that quiet, he understood something with a clarity that cut deep. He could build empires. He could earn fortunes. But if he let Isla go, he would lose the one thing money could never buy: the laughter in his home, the light in his son's eyes, the woman who made both feel alive. A gentle rain fell over the Saturday market, turning the cobblestones slick and shining. Tents shuddered in the wind, and the usual weekend bustle had faded to a soft hush. Isla stood behind her small stall in the back corner, her hands trembling as she arranged skewers of grilled tofu that no one had come to buy. She was running on little sleep. Her heart beat with a hollow ache that was somehow too loud. She missed Eric's laughter, missed David's steady voice, missed everything she convinced herself she could live without. But she kept her distance, wondering how she could ever belong in a world where headlines twisted her kindness into scandal. She reached for a paper tray when a familiar, breathless voice broke through the quiet. Isla. She turned and froze. David stood there, soaked to the skin, hair plastered his forehead, suit jacket gone, dress shoes slipping on the wet stones. He looked as if he'd run through the storm without stopping. He didn't care who saw him, didn't care how he looked. He was there for her. Isla, he said again, stepping closer, chest heaving. You disappeared. You left us. She tried to steady herself. I had to. No, he said. You chose to. Tears burned in her eyes. David, let me talk, Dash. He took another step, rain dripping from his sleeves. I don't need someone who fits into my world. I don't need someone who pretends to be perfect. I've met those women. I've walked those halls. I've sat at dinner tables with people who say the right words and feel nothing. He reached for her hand, cold and shaking, wet from the rain. I need someone my son trusts. I need the woman who made him laugh again, who taught him to cook dumplings and dream beyond his textbooks. I need the woman who ran into traffic for a stranger's child without thinking twice. Isla's breath caught. Her tears mixed with the rain. He stepped closer, lifting her hand to his chest. Can you feel that? He asked, voice soft. It hasn't stopped racing since you left. David, she whispered, searching his eyes, I don't care what the world says. I care about how you made that world disappear the moment you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a name, not a title, just someone worth loving. A sob escaped her. I don't belong in ballrooms, she said. I don't know how to speak their language or wear their armor. I'm not enough. He shook his head slowly. You're more than enough. You're real. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that real is rare. She looked down at their hands, his warm, hers trembling. Eric, she said softly. He's still Dash. He asks for you every night, David said. He hasn't smiled since you left. Isla closed her eyes. The weight of longing, love, and fear crashed over her. When she opened them, David was still there, waiting, not demanding, not persuading, just choosing her. She nodded at last, barely. I don't know how to walk into your world, David, she whispered. He smiled, tears in his own eyes. Then don't, he said. Just walk into mine. And in the middle of that rain-soaked market, beneath flickering tent lights and the scent of grilled corn and fish cakes, Isla fell into the arms of the man who chose her not because she fit the world he built, but because she made that world feel like home. The city moved on, as cities always do. Skyscrapers gleamed, cars honked, headlines changed. But on a quiet corner near the park, where the scent of fish cakes drifted on the air and laughter once again danced on the breeze, something precious returned. Isla was back, not with fanfare, not with flashing lights or designer dresses. She returned just as she had left in her apron, hands dusted with batter, standing behind her humble cart with a smile that warmed more than faces. It warmed hearts. She turned. No cameras. No interviews. She simply opened her fryer, dropped in a scoop of batter, and picked up right where she'd left off. The regulars noticed first. "Didn't think we'd see you again," said the man from the flower shop. Isla smiled. "Couldn't stay away. I missed the smell of fried dreams." He chuckled, but it wasn't until a familiar pair of footsteps raced across the crosswalk fast, breathless that the world seemed to pause. "Isla!" She looked up. Eric was running toward her, hair wild, school bag bouncing, tie askew. His eyes shone with something fierce and bright and unstoppable. She dropped her tongs and stepped out from behind the cart, but before she could say a word, he threw himself into her arms, nearly knocking her over. "Mama!" he cried, his voice breaking, arms tight around her waist. "You came back." Isla froze. Then her arms wrapped around him and she broke not with words, but with tears that slid down her cheeks as he held her like he'd never let go again. "Mama," he whispered, softer now, "I missed you every day." She gently ran her fingers through his hair, pressing her face to the top of his head. "I missed you more, sweetheart. So much more." A short distance away, David stood silently. He had followed Eric here just in case, but he stayed back, not wanting to intrude. He watched them, his son, and the woman who had transformed their world embrace in a love that didn't need blood to be real. He had once wished to give Eric a life free from loneliness and pain. And here it was not in grand mansions or glossy magazine pages, but on a street corner, in a hug, in a single word, spoken for the first time, "Mama." Isla finally lifted her gaze to meet David's eyes. He walked toward them, slow and steady, his eyes bright. Eric pulled away just enough to take her hand and place it in David's. "This is my mom," he said simply. David smiled. "I know." He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to, because in that moment, with Isla's hand in his and Eric pressed close to her side, David Carter understood the truth. He didn't need the world's approval. He didn't need flawless appearances or a perfect reputation. He just needed them. And as Isla turned back to her cart, laughing through tears and handing Eric the first fish cake of the day, David remained exactly where he belonged beside the only family he'd ever truly needed. The street looked different that morning, not because it had changed, but because of what it had become. A stretch of sidewalk near the park, once known only for its snack cart and a boy who loved to sneak out for dumplings, was now strung with fairy lights between lampposts, paper lanterns swaying in the breeze, and folding chairs gathered around a handmade wooden arch wrapped in ribbons and jasmine. There were no velvet carpets, no golden cutlery, no crystal chandeliers, but it was perfect because it was where everything had begun. David Carter stood at the end of the aisle, his suit jacket open at the collar, hair tousled by the wind, unconcerned with perfection. His hands were clasped in front of him, and for the first time in years he looked not like a CEO, but like a man waiting for something more important than any fortune he'd ever made. Music played softly from a small speaker beside the florist's cart. The air was filled with the scent of fried snacks and fresh daisies. And then Isla appeared. She wore a simple white dress, light as a breeze, with a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Her smile trembled, her eyes shone, but she walked with a confidence born of authenticity, not elegance. This was her sidewalk, her story, her beginning. Eric stood between them, dressed in a slightly too big gray suit, his bow tie crooked from tying it himself, beaming with pride. In his hands was a folded piece of paper. When Isla reached the end of the aisle, he cleared his throat. The crowd fell silent. Eric looked up, his eyes shining brighter than ever. "I wasn't always good with people," he began, his voice strong and clear. "I could always tell when someone was lying. I felt it like an itch under my skin. My dad called it an allergy." He smiled. "It got worse whenever someone tried to fake love, especially the ones who said they wanted to be my mom." A few guests chuckled gently. But then I met Isla. She didn't try to win me. She didn't even try to win my dad. She just was herself. She saved me before she knew me. She fed me before she even asked my name. And for the first time ever, my allergy disappeared. Isla's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. Eric looked up at her. "You healed me, Isla." not with medicine or therapy, but with your heart. He turned back to the guests. She's my mom, the best one I could have ever chosen. By the time he stepped back, many guests were wiping away tears. David moved forward, taking Isla's hands in his. I used to think I needed someone who fit into my world, he said gently. But then I realized what I truly needed was someone who made me want to live in theirs. Isla's voice shook, and I thought I had nothing to give. But love doesn't care what you have. It only asks if you're willing to give it. They exchanged vows beneath the archway, built by the same man who once built boardrooms, now choosing wood and nails over marble and steel. And when they kissed, there was no applause, just warmth, peace, and a sense of belonging. Months later, the little cart had become a cozy shop near the park, painted yellow with a hand-painted sign, Eric's Snack Corner. Inside, children gathered every Saturday to learn how to fry dumplings, play with cold batter, and share stories. The lessons were always free. The only rule? Share your snack with someone else before eating your own. Isla taught with flour on her cheeks and laughter in her voice. David worked from home more often now, his office window overlooking the park. Sometimes he'd sneak in to help roll dough. Other times, he'd just sit at the counter, listening to Eric teach new kids how to fold fish cakes like a pro. We used 3 pinches of love, Eric would say. No more, no less. They didn't live in a mansion. Their home was a 2-bedroom house with creaky floors, a backyard full of herb pots and chalk drawings. Dinner was sometimes takeout, sometimes a little burnt, but always together. There were no chandeliers, but there were string lights over the table and laughter in every room. One evening, as the sky turned golden and cicadas sang, Eric sat on the front steps with his head on Isla's shoulder. Hey, Mom. Yes, sweetheart. Thanks for not giving up on me. On us. She kissed his head. Thank you for calling me Mom. David joined them, sitting down beside them and pulling both close. And there, under a sky full of stories and the scent of warm batter, the Carter family stayed. Not because of money or status, but because love, when it's real, doesn't need palaces. It just needs a place to land, even if it's a sidewalk where fish cakes sizzle and hearts find their way home. Thank you for joining us on this heartwarming journey. The genius son of a millionaire single father is allergic to every woman who wants to marry his dad except for the street snack seller girl. This story reminds us that love doesn't need chandeliers or luxury to be real. It only asks for honesty, courage, and a heart willing to give without expecting anything in return. Isla didn't enter their lives with a plan. She simply was herself. And that was more than enough for Eric, for David, and for a family that learned to laugh, heal, and dream again. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or even brought a tear to your eye, please support our channel. Subscribe to Echoes of Resilience for more unforgettable tales that heal, inspire, and remind us of the beauty in everyday life. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary stories begin on the most ordinary sidewalks.